Hey everyone, what's up? I'm Bianca.
And I'm Kiara,
the dambrosiotwins. And welcome to Next Chapter with B and C. So for today's video, we have a very special guest. She's the author of You're on Fire, which just came out. As long as these amazing books behind us, we have Julie Buxbaum.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. I've been such a huge fan of you for years. I've been following all your books. I love every single one of them. And now we're here to talk about your newest release, You're on Fire. Okay, so this book is way different from your other books. So how did you come up with this story and all these characters?
So all of my books, I've long been obsessed with those moments in life where you wake up in one world and go to sleep in a fundamentally different one. And in all my books, it's generally something bad that changes, right? In Tell Me Three Things, a mom dies. In What to Say Next, there's a car accident. Hope and Other Punchlines, it's 9/11. In Admission, the main character's mom gets arrested. But when I sat down to write You're on Fire, I of course could not let go of that, the thought of like the whole world changing, but I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to write about something good for a change? You're on Fire is about four best friends whose lives are fundamentally changed by a 10-second, earth-shatteringly amazing kiss. And sort of how their lives unfold from there.
I was on the edge of my seat this entire book. Like, you kept me so intrigued. I love all the characters, and my personal favorite was Emmy. So which one was your favorite to write for and least favorite to write for?
Paige was my favorite to write for, mostly because she's probably the most unlikable of all the characters, and I find writing unlikable characters really fun and also really difficult because there's a challenge of you want your readership to be invested in the person even while disliking them, which is always a tricky, line to walk. She was my favorite to write. Ro is somewhat based on my husband. So my husband and I both had sort of what I consider to be complicated childhoods. And we always talk about how when we were young, we wish we had each other to sort of help us through. And so I wrote Ro sort of based on him. My husband's Indian from London, and he has the adorable accent that Ro has in the book, and so he was fun to write too. It was fun to sort of visit my husband at 16.
Oh my god, that's adorable.
I know, it's so funny that you say it's adorable because part of me was like, does that sound creepy?
No,
not creepy.
So cute. So speaking of romance, this is a spoiler alert, was Emmy and Ro always gonna end up together? Was it, Ro and Paige? What was originally the main couple?
So in my mind, I had these two love stories that I wanted to tell, one straight and one queer, and I always knew who was going to pair with who. I mean, I don't always know how the book is going to unfold in terms of plot and where the characters are going to take me, but I always know sort of my pairings, like who has to be together, because that is the fundamental thing that keeps the book going. Will they or won't they? And of course, they will. They will! That's the place I like to play in. I don't think it would have worked had I, had them divert from their true path.
This book is told in like a third-person perspective, and most of your books are told in first. And so now we have third perspective with 4 different POVs, which is something different. So what made you want to write in that way?
So it's my first time actually doing third person close. And each book, when I sit down to start to tell the story I want to tell, I have to decide how I'm going to tell this story and what's the best way to tell the story. And there's all sorts of decisions you have to make, right? Like, is it first person or third person? Am I going to alternate chapters in time? And so in some of my books, I have 2 characters who are first person. In some books, I have then and now. It should be now and then, actually, come to think of it backwards. In You're on Fire, because I wanted to tell the story of these 4 friends' lives changing, I felt like we had to understand the 4 people and get close to them. I wanted 4 distinct characters as opposed to 4 distinct voices, because I felt like it would get tricky if you were listening in the I form to all the characters and not being able to keep track of who was who. I don't know if it was easier to write in third person in some ways. One of the things in first person I find really interesting is there's this dichotomy between what your character knows and what the reader knows. And when you're writing the character, you have to sort of bridge that gap and signal things to the reader that the character doesn't yet understand about themselves. Right? Like, what are the things they're hiding from themselves, but as a reader, we're like, oh, she's in denial that she's in love with him, or whatever. But when you do third person close, you don't actually have to play in that gap, which I think makes it way easier. The challenge I found is getting close enough, because I feel like in first person, you're 100% in their head, right? And so there is no distance, and third person has an automatic built-in distance, no matter how close you get. My friend Nikki Yoon, who wrote Everything, Everything, I think I've seen a bunch of her books up here, she claims one of the tricks you could use is to write in first person and then switch it to third, and that like alleviates that distance. It's a good tip, I think.
Do you want to write more books in third person, or will you want to do like the first person?
think it totally depends on the book. I think every book is different. Every story is different. Every time I sit down to write a book, I actually keep all my books on my desk because every time I sit down to start a new book, I'm like, I don't know how to write a book. I don't know what I'm doing. And if they're on my desk, I'm like, yes, you do. You've done it before. So I don't think the perspective is the thing that I don't approach and say, oh, I want to write a third person book. I sit down and say, I want to write this book. Now, what is the best way to tell this story?
Kiara and I, because we've read all of your books, we kind of saw when you hinted that other characters were in You're on Fire. So for example, you mentioned 9/11 and Baby Hope, and she makes an appearance in this book. And then you mentioned Chloe from A Mission. So I'm just curious if your next novel is going to be a young adult novel, or are any of the characters from You're on Fire going to make an appearance? Or have you not decided that yet? Or...
So far, no. So I'm currently working on 2 books. I'm working on a middle grade series that launches in September. So for readers 8 to 12, it's called the Area 51 Files. And it is set in such a different world that there's no opportunity for crossover, I don't think. I mean, maybe there's some really clever Easter egg way, but it doesn't naturally work, right? It's set in Area 51. I'm working on an adult book. So I'm not sure whether these characters will appear. They might. There is a time crossover between some of my worlds, so maybe. But I just love Easter eggs. I think they're fun. Like I just think it's fun to reward people who have kept reading. And also, there's nothing more fun than someone be like, oh my God, Baby Hope's in here. She's from the other, that kind of stuff. It warms my heart. So
that's literally what I did. I was like, oh my God. Did you always know, spoiler alert, that Paige was going to be the one that set the place on fire? Or were you just sort of like figuring out as you went along?
Pretty early on, I knew it was her. Not from like page 1, but maybe a few chapters in, I understood that she was deeply troubled and was responsible. But one of the things that was important to me was to sort of feel like any of these characters at different times would be capable of doing something like that for very different reasons. Like every single character had their own reasons for wanting to burn it all down. And I feel like part of being a teenager is having that instinct to want to just burn things down, right? Like there's that, everything feels so big, and is big. I don't mean to diminish those feelings because they're real. It didn't take very long to see that she really was the one who was most broken, perhaps. I wanted you to feel like anyone could possibly do it.
I was lost. I couldn't figure it out. I thought it was Emmy for a second. Funny enough, I actually figured it out kind of like halfway through. Kiara didn't know up until
I was just
she had no idea. I
kind
of figured it out because there's one line when it was in Emmy's perspective, or third person chapter, and it was like, Paige was always a great actress. And I was like, that's kind of odd. Like, why would you say that? How did you come up with all of Paige's kind of big moments? Because she has like a lot of like trouble. Like, did you know all of them, or were you like writing along, you're like, oh, maybe this is kind of explaining for something else she's doing here?
I feel like with all of my characters, they develop as I write. When I'm writing a book, the second half tends to be way better than the first half with my first draft. Because as I'm writing, I start to understand the characters and who they are and their motivations. And so by the second half of the book, they really come into focus, right? And so then I stop and then I go back with all the information I gained by writing the book and add it to the first half. And so they get sharper with each draft. It drives me crazy actually, because I hate that the second halves are always so much stronger when I get the draft. I'm like, oh, this sucks. Oh. And I have to take that and like sort of shuffle it to the front. With Paige, I don't know, I did not know what she was going to do. I mean, I knew there were going to be breaking points, and she needed to have breaking points. I wasn't quite sure what were going to be the things that break her and how that was going to manifest, other than fire, obviously. But there were a few scenes, like her running for class president, I did not expect. I did not expect the scene in the hotel. There were certain things that came up and I was like, oh yes, that's exactly what you would do.
With Jackson and then the guard. I remember reading that, I was like, oh, I know what you did. I saw the guard come through and I was like, oh gosh.
Chase, I wanted that to hurt. I wanted us to all be a little squeamish as we were reading those chapters, because they are really, I don't know what the word is, but
it makes you want to like cringe, especially when he was cringy. Yes. Especially when he was like, I thought you went to UCLA. Oh gosh. Yeah, I was like, oh, LA is kind of like the big center of this book, and it was so fun because we all live in LA, and I related to so many of the things that were like brought up in this book about like, oh, the fire season starts here, or oh, let's go to the Grove, or let's not go to the Grove.
I saw the Grove, I was like, oh my gosh, the Grove.
No one talks about the Grove. I love Wood Valley. I think that that's like a great place for so many different stories. Like a mission was there and they brought that up. And I just loved it so much. I thought it was really good how you brought everything together. I love Jackson and Arch's story. I think that it was so beautifully done.
They're so sweet, and I love that, you know, their single amazing moment is what spurs all these characters on their own adventures. Also, they're just so cute.
They were so cute. I have to admit, I was kind of like a little more like, ooh, they got together more than Emmy and Roe. Which, I mean, obviously Emmy and Roe were like really cute, but like there's something about Arch and Jackson. Their kiss, like you said, sparked this entire thing. Not even like the fire that happens. Like them alone kind of started this entire story, and I loved it. I thought it was really amazing.
One thing I also loved about them is, so Emmy and Roe, we see them meet, but Jackson and, oh my God, Archie, I just literally just blanked. Jackson and Arch have a history, and we get to sort of dip into the history and their memories a little bit, not too much, but just enough that we can seed sort of the growing of their friendship that grows into love, and I really enjoyed sort of that whole arc.
I think Jackson is an adorable character, and you really get to see him grow and make him more likable, because you just start him off in this really bad place and you really don't understand why. Because Paige and Jackson both go through different things. So how did you make them more likable, especially Paige at the end?
I don't know if I made Paige more likable. I see plenty of reviews that talk about how they don't like Paige. And I don't think my job was necessarily to make her more likable. I think my job was to make her understandable and relatable, and for you to have empathy for who she is as a person. I don't mind if someone reads the entire book and gets to the end and says, Paige, oh my God, I can't stand her. I just want the reader to be like, okay, she is not someone I want to hang out with, but she is someone I fundamentally understand on a personal level. And I enjoyed reading about her transformation.
Yeah, Paige was a very interesting character to read from, especially some of the things she was saying. I was like, was there like certain clues that you kind of put in the very beginning, or certain lines? Like, obviously Paige was a really good actress. Was there any clues that we might have missed, or Kiara might have missed?
Yeah, I might have missed them all.
I really missed. I was like, what? She has the light in her pocket. I was like, what's going on?
Yeah, there are definitely some clues. I'm trying to remember all of them. There's one when she slips off to the bathroom in the very beginning of the book, just before the fire. And it's like one little phrase, I think, even. She slips out and comes back. I'm trying to think where else. There's probably a few more places. I don't remember exactly, but yeah.
Wow. I can't believe I missed that. I was reading it and it just blew over my mind. The Paige was a really good actress line clicked to me, and then it made me realize that she just wants to get her mom's attention. I mean, her dad just, you don't really see him or hear him at all in this book, but she really wants to get her mom's attention. And that all really clicked to me, especially when I thought back to the very beginning when she meets Ro, and she's like, okay class, let's get out, let's do this. And like, she kind of wants to save everyone because she couldn't be saved herself, if that makes any sense. And that's when everything kind of came full circle. And I didn't tell my theory to Kiara, because I'm like, I'm not gonna say anything.
No,
she was in the dark. She's like, is it Jackson? I'm like, I don't think it's Jackson. No, I thought it was Emmy for a second, because she wanted to leave LA because of her dad. And so I was like, oh, maybe she would do this, so she has a good reason. But then when I saw it was Paige, I was like, oh, it's her. Yeah, it makes more sense. Well, speaking of that, so Emmy and Arch are twins, which I read that and I was like, haha, they're twins. I'm twin too. It's funny how, you know, they both they grew up in the same, you know, space, but Arch isn't really in the rush to leave, but Emmy is. And I wanted to know, like, was Emmy gonna be always the one who wanted to leave, or was Arch gonna be the one who wanted to leave?
So I have a brother, I don't have a twin. But I'm always fascinated by and I have two children, and I'm always fascinated by the fact that both of my kids are growing up in exactly the same house, with exactly the same parents, and they are fundamentally different people. And they're reacting to the circumstances of my parenting in fundamentally different ways that I feel like mostly are out of my control. They are who they are. You know, yes, parenting matters and all that stuff, but like, people come out who they are. And with these siblings who are dealing with a really, really troubled family, I wanted to show how each of them would react in fundamentally different ways. So Emmy's instinct is to get out of Dodge. She wants nothing to do with her family anymore, other than her brother, who she loves dearly. But even him, I think she feels like is too much of a tether. And she wants to understand who she is independent of him. Arch, on the other hand, because of the circumstances of his family, I think feels incredibly tied to his home and wants to be there to, you know, pick up the pieces. He's sort of the one who everyone relies on quietly. So yeah, from the very beginning, I knew that they were gonna have opposite reactions to their parents.
I just love the relationship because I'm a twin, so I understood like, you know, we want to be our own separate individuals, but also we're like the same, we're attached. What was your favorite and least favorite scene to write in this book?
You know, it's funny, I was just about to say my favorite scene is there's a scene when they're on their bunk beds.
Yes.
And both of them are thinking about the universe and their place in the universe. They're thinking about exactly the same thing and the opposite of the same thing at exactly the same time. And I thought that was sort of a beautiful moment. My least favorite scene, I think it's, you know, with Paige and the security guard, all of those scenes were so hard to write. I knew that I think readers were gonna think it was gonna go in a certain direction, and I definitely intentionally did not go in that direction, but there were still such awkward, hard moments that like I was cringing as I was writing them. Like I often feel the emotion of whatever's happening in the book while I write it, and so a scene like that is really challenging, uncomfortable, and challenging.
I remember reading the first time you mentioned it, was like, oh, something's gonna happen. And thank gosh, like, you know, you stopped it right before people thought where it was gonna go. This is a really big spoiler discussion, but major spoiler alert. So Paige, I think, has a bunch of like big things, obviously, but a bunch of things that kind of happen to her that makes her want to just shave her head. And that was not where I was expecting this to go. And then that also happened to be the scene where Arch tells her. I read this kind of like Arch is thinking, oh, okay, so she's in her most vulnerable state. I'll just tell her about what happened, what was the truth of what happened. And it was interesting to see her different reactions to Emmy kissing Jackson versus Arch kissing Jackson. Was her reaction always like Emmy was more of a betrayal, or was Arch more like, okay, I support him in that sense? Because that's how I read it. It was like, that's really different reactions to what really happened.
I'm not sure it's about support so much as the fact that they are true best friends, all three of them. As much as we may not like her, I think she's an amazing friend. And I actually do like her. I just think she's troubled, right? And so one of the things I think that was driving her bananas was not understanding. Like when you know your friends and you know who they are, for them to do something so out of character that doesn't make sense in the history of the friendship, I think is really hard to get over. Not only the betrayal necessarily, but like the betrayal in context of who we are to each other. And I think once she finds out it's Arch, it makes so much more sense to her, and that settles her in a way that Emmy did not.
So to wrap up this portion of the video, tell me 3 words you would use to describe this book.
Fire, love, squee, too close to love.
No, that fire, love, and squee. That got me. So now we're gonna be moving on to a fun little game that we want to play. We're gonna be playing a this or that game. This is gonna be quick, rapid fire. These are just kind of basic questions that I was just kind of curious about. So, Julie, dog or cat?
Dog, 1000%.
Netflix or YouTube?
Ooh, both?
Phone call or text?
Text, 1000% text.
You're a bad caller?
Don't call me.
Toast or eggs?
Eggs, I'm gluten-free.
Oh, yes. Cardio or weights? I know my answer is not cardio.
Neither?
Neither. That's my answer.
But neither.
That's the right answer. Facebook or Twitter?
Twitter.
Ice cream cone or snow cone?
Ice cream cone.
Pop or indie music?
Indie? No, I listened to the Harry Styles album on the way over. Pop. I don't know.
Would you rather be at a big party or small gathering?
Small gathering. I really am not a big party person. I'm an introvert.
Jogging or hiking?
Hiking.
Sneakers or sandals?
Sneakers. I'm wearing sneakers right now.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I'm wearing Converse.
We love Converse. That's so
She's
cute.
wearing Converse too.
Converse. I'm not. I'm just wearing socks. So this one you can kind of interpret as like a love. Would you rather receive like a love letter or like a big romantic gesture?
Oh my gosh, I'm not sure. I think a love letter. A love letter is what sort of sparked Tell Me 3 Things. And so I wrote a whole book about that. And I do love a gesture, but like in love languages, I'm a words of affirmation person. So I'm gonna say love letter.
Oh, okay.
I took these very seriously, as you can tell.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. We so appreciate it. I love this book. I think this and Tell Me 3 Things are like my favorite books you've ever wrote, but I love all of them so much and they're so different. If you really want to get to know these characters, please read this book. It's everything. And I love the way that you ended it. It perfectly wrapped up every decision and every storyline, so I really appreciate that in a book. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, and thank you guys so much for watching at home. And we hope you guys will pick up all her books. They're truly amazing.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.